it would always be to get curious and it would always be to ask questions. So quite often when we really pay attention to our thoughts, because a lot of people don't pay attention to their thoughts, they follow them blindly and they trust them like they're a fact, but they don't really pay attention to what they are. So if we have the same thoughts all the time, we'll keep doing the same thing. Nothing will change for us. But when we start to question it, we start to question like, that's interesting. Why do I think X isn't possible for me? It opens up a whole new avenue of ways that we can, whether it's journaling or discussing with a therapist or a coach, to start to look for different actions that we can take to get a different result.
Hello, and welcome to episode 168 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review or rating. That would mean a lot to me. Tell a friend about the podcast and help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. A former air traffic controller turned coach, Emma-Louise Parkes, knows what it's like to regulate emotions and bounce back into an immensely stressful position. She self-identifies as an introvert while simultaneously breaking the mold of what an introvert looks like. Bringing energy, empathy, focused questions, and an unwavering belief in the power of quiet, Emma-Louise has worked with over 500 clients and touched the lives of over 80,000 people through her podcast. In her world, introversion is not a mark of shyness or fear. It's a clue into how someone recharges their energy. And by showing ambitious introverts how to manage their energy, she's able to consistently and drastically transform how much they're able to achieve in their business and careers. All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Emma-Louise. So good to have you on today.
Thank you. It's so lovely to see you again in such a short space of time after I interviewed you for The Ambitious Introvert.
Yeah. So great to be on your podcast. And we're going to talk about your podcast for sure. And the great work you do around introversion and helping introverts. So tell us about yourself. What was your journey like as an introvert, HSP, an empath, and now you're coaching introverts?
So I've always been fascinated by people. I've always been hugely into personal development and enjoyed just learning different concepts. And what I'd say it was probably my mid-30s that I happened to be listening to a podcast and someone mentioned introverts and they had a very brief discussion about what it meant. And I was like, oh, that sounds very much like me. I really identify with what they were saying there. I think it was something about being drained in groups. And I've always considered myself as very sociable, very confident, all of those things. But I did get very, very drained. I never enjoyed kind of, parties or anything really noisy or anything like that as much as I loved people. So that got me curious. So I went down the rabbit hole of researching everything about introversion, took the Myers-Briggs, got INFJ, read the description and cried because I felt like I was reading my soul. It was the weirdest thing. It was so emotional. And there was so many, INFJ is one of the rarer types. And there were so many quirks in there that I had probably thought for years, am I a bit odd? Am I a bit weird? Is this a bit strange? And to see them on the page, I felt so validated. I was like, I exist. And interestingly, a friend of mine who we had very similar ways of being and, discussions about these things. I sent the link straight to him and I just said, take this test and let me know what 4 letters you get. And, 15 minutes later, he said, INFJ, why? And then I was like, okay, now this is like double validation because I can start to see it. So yeah, once I understood that about myself and learned more, I also came across, like you say, high sensitivity and empath and all these things that seem to really encompass everything that I'd experienced all through my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that was me too. The Myers-Briggs was definitely instrumental in helping me figure out, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. actually a lot of amazing things about
Yeah.
introversion, and
Yeah,
it's definitely
completely.
eye opening. And yeah, I'm a INTJ, so the difference is, so there's a lot of similarities there, but definitely your approach is going to be a little more the empathic side, the highly sensitive side, and mine's going to be a little more analytical. Not that, you might be analytical sometimes too, or I might be, so, but it definitely talks about our preferences and it's so good to talk about how we're the same. That was probably amazing, with your friend, or, where we
Yeah.
differ and how our gifts, how we can support each other in our gifts.
It's funny you say being a T because I've had two INTJ coaches and I work very, very well with them. And I think it's because they understood me and I understood them, but where my F can maybe have me getting a little bit floaty and a little bit
Yeah.
unstructured and oh, I feel like this, the T kind of grounds it and was able to say, okay, what's the actual facts here, or like what's the strategy about this? So I feel like that balance was really great, which is another great reason of understanding ourselves, right? So that we understand our strengths and where we can plug into other people's strengths to support us best.
Yeah, absolutely. So you figured out that you were an introvert, and then was there a process of embracing it, or what did that look like for you?
I don't think I ever had any kind of negative feelings about it. I was quite excited. I was
Okay.
quite excited to have not a label, that's the wrong word, but that it
Right.
was a thing and that I could embrace it and learn more about it. And also that there were things that it was very obvious that I could implement in my life that were going to have a huge difference to me, like spending time alone, like making sure I wasn't getting overstimulated, like being very intentional with how I scheduled myself and not overscheduling, which, is, I know something you're passionate about as well. So I think really I embraced it and it was just a deeper part of learning who I am and what I need to thrive. Up until that point, I'd been on a journey of, yes, personal development, but also with my health. I'd had some health issues in my early 30s. So I had to really change my mindset about what I thought was healthy and what was good for me and, make some difficult lifestyle changes that ultimately made me feel so much better. And I think I applied that same logic to it. It's like, oh, well, society might think that I should be going out and I should be socializing in groups or I should enjoy this activity, but I don't. And if I can embrace the things that are actually going to nourish me, I'm going to be so much better for it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's too often people are made to feel like, well, you should like this, you should enjoy
Mm,
this. And it's like, what you like. We have people that we care about in our lives. There's always going to be, we're going to do things with other people. There's going to be some compromise there. But as far as what we like, we need to own that and just, yeah, this is what is good for me. This is what I like. And don't be afraid to do that.
yeah, totally.
So, how did you become an entrepreneur and a coach? Tell us about that.
So I would never have expected to be an entrepreneur. I'd never in my life have expected to own a business. I'm not from an entrepreneurial background, I had no desire to do this. But as I was in my 30s, I was already coaching in my job. I was an air traffic controller and I became a mentor to new air traffic controllers. So training them before they got their qualification. And I really loved that. I really loved the mindset aspect of it because as you can imagine, that's a job where you need a lot of confidence and you need to take action quickly. And I just really enjoyed seeing people grow in that training process from day one of, feeling quite nervous because they'd got to talk to real airplanes and keep them separated to, sitting there doing it themselves because they'd done the work and learned everything and qualified. But as you'd expect with that kind of job, especially in busy airspace like London, there is a high attrition rate. And I was really fascinated by why people could come in, people that were highly intelligent, people that had unbelievable qualifications, and they would have the same standard of training as someone else. And then they didn't make it. And that really led me down another rabbit hole about mindset and confidence, which led me down the neurolinguistic programming route, coaching, all of these things. And as these things just built and built over years with my own development, I realized that that was what I was really passionate about. I'd been in aviation for probably 20 years at that point. So as much as I loved it and I still love the industry, I think I was ready for change, and having those health issues that I talked about as well, that had made me really reevaluate what was important to me. So I think it was the perfect storm of numerous things. And then back in 2019, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually make coaching my thing.
Awesome. I got to ask because I've heard your podcast. I've heard you talk about being an air traffic controller. What drew you into that in the first place?
So when I dropped out of college, I dropped out of college because I wanted to travel. So I had no money. So I was trying to work out, how can I travel and get paid for it? This is how my mindset works. It's like, I want to do this. How can I do it? And I came upon the idea of being a flight attendant. So I applied. And when I was 18, I got a job as a flight attendant. And I did a mix of domestic and international routes. So that kind of scratched that itch of, I got to travel and I got paid for it. So that kind of thrust me into the industry. But it became quite apparent maybe after a couple of years that although that was fun, that wasn't a lifestyle that I wanted long term. Jet lag, living out of a suitcase, lots of people in an aluminium tube together for, a highly sensitive introvert. Not the best thing. So I started to research what else could I do. And I was in a situation where I thought, I don't really have any qualifications here or any skills. And one of the girls that I was on a flight with one day mentioned she was leaving to be an air traffic controller. And I was like, oh, sounds quite interesting. I'd been in the flight deck before, obviously, and heard them on the radios. And it just sounded like gibberish, complete gobbledygook. I had no idea what was going on. And she said, oh yeah, I'm going to go and do that. And, train to be a controller. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And I went home to my then partner, who was a pilot. And I said, this girl's leaving to be an air traffic controller. That sounds really interesting. I might look into it. And he went, oh, don't bother. I applied 3 times and I didn't get in. So you've got no chance. So I was like, challenge accepted. So I wrote off for the application form, because this was, when you had to fill out the paper thing and send it back by mail. And I got an interview and I went through the 3-stage interview process and I got the job. And literally, I was so unattached to the outcome, which, is something we talk about in mindset of not being desperate for one thing and being open. But I was curious. I was interested in it. I thought it could be fun. But I was like, I'll just give it a go and see what happens. And I got in and I turned up and I did the training and that was it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's very interesting. And you did it for quite some time, right?
Yeah, so I joined in 2003. I passed the interview in 2001. And then because of September the 11th, they had a small hold on starting the training. So I started in 2003 in the end. And I left in early 2020. So almost 17 years.
Wow. And so then you became a coach, and you had done some coaching in your previous work. How did you decide to work specifically with introverts?
So when I looked at building a coaching business online, there were so many resources. There was so much noise. And I had 0 business experience. So I knew nothing about marketing. I knew nothing about sales. I just didn't understand any of these concepts. I wasn't on social media. I didn't know anything really about that. So it was a big learning curve for me to get to the stage where I could even be online and promote services. So at this stage, I was more of a general, mindset life coach. And then people were like, you need a niche and you need packages and all these different things. And I found it really overwhelming. I mean, okay, I was building this alongside a full-time job, but also some of the business advice out there felt very icky. And some of it was because I wasn't used to it and it was new and I was getting out of my comfort zone. And, that's one thing. But some of it just felt so exhausting. And I was like, cold DM 100 people a day or get on video every day or these things. I was like, really, is this the only way? Because that's feels very, very tiring to me. And I gave some of these things a go and just completely burnt myself out. It just didn't feel good in the slightest. And a lot of coaches are, you know, of the they like to think that that's because of mindset. And it can be. Absolutely, we can have mindset around visibility and showing up. But I started to realize that there were other things that I could do very easily. Like I could talk on a podcast very easily. I had no issues around that. So it really led me to think, because I'm an introvert, do I need to look at a different way to do my business? Maybe being on social for 3 hours a day isn't aligned, but there must be other ways that I can market. And it really came from that. I'd resisted choosing a niche, and then it presented itself to me because I was like, oh, I've spent the last 18 months learning all of this stuff as an introvert. So maybe I can support other introverts that are early in their business journey. And that's how it started.
That's brilliant because, and that's what this show's really all about, is often extrovert advice doesn't work for us introverts, you know? And I've learned that with so many things. And I'm not saying that we can't learn from extroverts, because we absolutely can. But if someone doesn't understand your strengths and needs, their advice may not work. And we can be very successful, but often it's going to be taking a different approach. And I love that. So let's talk about strengths. What are strengths you have because you're an introvert?
Oh, I love that. Strengths I have because I'm an introvert. I definitely process things very deeply. I'm not very happy with surface level. I don't like surface level answers. I don't like surface level information. So I love to research and I love to very deeply understand different concepts. It's, someone else will read a blog post on something. I'll read 3 different books on it because I want to understand it. And I think that has helped me because it's given me a knowledge of a broad cross section of topics, but in a good way. And especially with coaching and different modalities and ways that I can support my clients. But also that desire to understand and go a little bit deeper. Obviously, as a coach, that's really helpful because if my clients are saying, oh, I'm struggling to do this, and I just go, oh, do this instead. We could end up in this circle of going around and they do that and then it's not working. And it's like, well, try this. But if we can get to the root, if we can go a little bit deeper and understand, like, why isn't it working for them? How are they feeling about it? What might be holding them back from something? That real kind of drive that I have, I think, to get a little bit deeper and learn and know a little bit more has really helped me, not just as a coach, but in my business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's some strengths that we have as introverts, we're deep thinkers, but there's definitely, we vary, like just in the fact that you mentioned you were an INFJ and I'm an INTJ, there's ways that we vary. What are some other strengths that you've seen in people that you've worked with? And why is it so important that we play to our strengths?
So one of the things that I've seen a lot in my clients, and I will say I do attract a lot of F clients,
Okay.
is empathy. And this is something you and I have talked about, right? Because it's quite easy for people to put a label on and say introverts as if everyone's the same. Whereas, you and I we have very different personalities, but we still have the same energetic needs underneath that. So I've definitely seen empathy being, I'm going to say, a huge strength and very, very helpful, especially because a lot of my clients have been coaches or they've been creatives where they really need to understand the essence of someone that they're designing for or writing for. So having that empathy is really helpful. But on the flip side, that empathy can be quite derailing for us as well, because it can be difficult to know where we stop and where other people's feelings begin. So you can end up with a lot of emotional labor and taking on a lot of other people's feelings. So I think it's important to see, what can be the strength can also be the poison, and finding the right balance of recognizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So on this podcast, we talk about the strengths of introverts, the needs of introverts, some strategies for success. We also bust some myths. Is there any myth that you want to bust about introversion today?
Yes. And this is why I love what you're doing in the world. The biggest misconception that I see is that introversion is to do with personality traits. So introverts are shy. introverts are socially awkward. Introverts are bad at public speaking. The list goes on and on and on. Introverts are not confident. And it's just so frustrating because introversion is the way we recharge our energy and the way we process information. As you say, this depth of processing. There are plenty of shy extroverts out there. There are plenty of underconfident extroverts or ones that hate public speaking. This is not exclusive to introverts. And I think where it's a real shame is people and companies in particular try to quote unquote fix their introverts by putting them on a public speaking course or helping them be more confident, which just drains them even more. If they focused on, like you say, what are your strengths? Oh, you're a very deep thinker and you process deeply. So let's put you in a role that supports that. Or if they understood, oh, actually, you're going to work better maybe alone in a quiet space, away from people. So this idea that it's tied to personality traits and lumping, what they think is now what I think 53% of the population, lumping us all into one, like all introverts are like this, is just not helpful. So that's my soapbox. That's the myth I would like to bust. It's your energetic needs and it's your depth of processing.
Yeah. And definitely at least half the population. And how can you stereotype half the population?
I know, right?
Yeah. So we're definitely not all the same. There's some commonalities and there's things we can learn from each other, but we're not all the same. That's for sure.
You had that great episode a few weeks ago about why extroverted introvert is unhelpful. And that's the one that gets the eye roll. I've had so many messages from people going, oh, guess what? I'm an extroverted introvert. And I'm like, what? And it's usually that they're a confident social introvert, but they take in extroversion to mean those things.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's like people, you probably have this experience all the time too. They say, well, I need my quiet time, but I like people. So, I must be an extrovert. And I'm like, hey, guess what? I like people too, but I'm definitely an introvert, And,
yeah.
and when I hear things like extroverted, introvert, or even ambivert, a lot of times they're not getting at their strengths or their needs. They're trying to say, I'm okay. And, our message is you're okay as an introvert, and maybe there is some middle ground, but for the most part, we do have preferences and, sure. And I don't ever call things extroverted behaviors. I that kind of drives me crazy too. Like we're having a podcast, two introverts. I'm totally enjoying it. I don't think this is me being an extrovert. I think it's me being an introvert, having a great conversation. I prepared for it. I might need to recharge afterward, even though I'm totally enjoying this conversation, but I don't call behaviors extrovert. I don't think it's helpful. So it's what's helpful, like what the labels don't help you if you don't know what they mean. Like you don't know, you described very well how you're a great researcher. If you don't understand that about yourself, you might not really tap into it the way that you do. Or, we're going to talk about some needs that you might have or that I might have. If all you have is the label, I'm an extrovert or introvert, do you know how you manage your energy? And that's what's really important. It's the label doesn't even matter. It's really the label helps you get to, here's my strength. I'm a great researcher. I really dive in. I can help my clients because of that, or I can manage my energy. So let's talk about that because I know that's important to both of us, how we manage our energy. And again, you're an introvert. You're also a highly sensitive person and an empath. So how do you manage your energy, and do all three of those things bring, energy management to make energy management important for you?
Energy management is vital for me, and it's probably the most important thing I would say that I do with clients. Yes, we do mindset work. Yes, we do goals and strategy and all of that. But without the foundation of their energy being managed, none of that matters, because it's like building something on quicksand. You can have all of these ideas and goals and action plans, And then if you're just too exhausted to even put them into practice, you're not going to get the results that you want. So yeah, to me, it's vital. And it's funny because it's such a standard part of my life now, managing my energy, that I don't really think about it. And I remember a couple of years ago on the podcast, one of my extroverted friends, she said, you should do an episode about all of the things you do to manage your energy. It would be really popular. And I was like, but I don't do anything special. And she was like, well, you've got your aura ring and you've got your blue blocking glasses and you've got your blackout blinds and you've got your meditation practice and you've got your weighted blanket. Like, and she listed all of these things off that are just such a normal part of my life now. And I did the episode and it was so popular. People were reaching out going, oh my God, thank you for sharing this. So yeah, energy management I have taken so seriously that it's just become part of life now. And a lot of it for me is physical because of being a highly sensitive person. Stimulus is very draining to me. So as we sat here now, I have blue light shield on my laptop to try and minimize the effects of that. I've got, I don't know what you would call it in the States. We call it a SAD lamp, a seasonal adaptation disorder lamp. So it's meant to stimulate sunlight during the winter so that we still get some vitamin D. I will, like you say, after this, I will close the laptop, and as nice as this conversation is, I will just go and chill. I'll probably read in silence for a little bit. And the biggest thing has been really managing my calendar, which, you know, we talked about when you were a guest on my podcast, to make sure that there is space, because it's so easy just to fill all of that white space up and be doing thing after thing after thing. And suddenly you've gone weeks without any true time to yourself. So that's probably a very long-winded answer, and I could probably talk even more. But yeah, energy management to me, if you do nothing else as an introvert, that's going to be the number one thing to really help change things for you.
Okay. What's your biggest tip for an introvert to manage their energy?
Take time alone. And I don't mean take time away from your business or your job, but still be out and about doing a million things or socializing all the time. I'm not saying be a recluse. Like, we do not have to close ourselves off from society. But when will you last alone without anyone else's energy being an input? So not listening to a podcast or not listening to the radio or not chatting to someone, but actually just being in your own energy and being okay with that and decompressing. For a lot of introverts, even those that are very familiar with what they need, they're probably not doing it enough. So where can you carve out that time? Where can you be alone? Even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes a day, but doing it consecutively is so beneficial. And it's the biggest thing that my clients report has made the biggest impact in their energy.
So how often do you do that? And I say this because I don't think there's a formula for anybody. I think everybody has to figure it out themselves. But how often do you feel like you need to have that time you just described?
So I'm going to caveat this by saying I do not have kids. I don't have a family. I know it's very, very different for people that do or that are living in a busy household. So yeah, I don't have that. I would say when I was a controller, because I was always around other people, I was doing shifts, there was a lot of stimulus. I didn't get enough alone time for sure. And that I was only in the beginnings of trying to understand then what I actually needed energetically. Now, what I do is I make sure that my calls are batched on certain days. So there are never calls on a Monday or a Friday, which means that when Tuesday comes round, I may have 4 or 5 client calls, which I'm fine with having that in a day because I've just had that 4-day stretch where I've been able to recharge. Obviously, I'm not fully alone for the whole 4 days, but there will be significant parts of it where I am. I wear noise cancelling headphones quite a lot. That's a big one for me. So if I'm going to be out and about where there are a lot of people, but I can still want to be in my own energy, I don't want to be overhearing people's conversations, I'll wear noise cancelling headphones. And I take a lot of baths. I love a bath. I am a Brit after all. So to me, I can easily lay in, and I've got a soaking tub, so I can easily lay there for 20 minutes, half an hour in the evening pure alone time. So when you start to add those things up, I get quite a lot of alone time. And like I say, I do appreciate if people have different commitments or they're caregivers. That can be more difficult to cultivate, but definitely not impossible. Even 10 or 15 minutes somewhere in the day is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah. And you just have to figure out what works for you. But introverts will do better with that quiet time, with that, and there's all kinds of ways that we can do that. So I had the pleasure of being on your podcast. I've listened to many episodes of your podcast. Tell us about the Ambitious Introvert podcast.
Oh, the podcast came about because of playing to our strengths, literally. When I had niched into introverts and I understood that that's who I could best help at that stage in my business and help them to start their businesses, I had realized that I wasn't going to be on social media. I wasn't going to be making reels and dancing around in the same way as a lot of people. And so I knew that I needed a medium that I would enjoy and that would be effective for me. And the podcast was just a no-brainer. Like, I love talking to people. I love asking people questions. Again, that research and that curiosity comes in very deeply. So I remember working with a coach. It was our first session together, and I was just starting everything for introverts. And she said, "Tell me what you do." I'm a coach for introverts. And she was like, "Oh, I love that." And then she said, "Do you have a podcast?" I said, "No, but I'd like one." And she said, "Introverts all listen to podcasts." I'm like, "Yes." And she went, "What are you going to call it?" And I went, "The Ambitious Introvert Podcast." And she went, "Great." And that was like the first 2 minutes of our call. And the podcast was born. And that was back in June 2020. And I launched in October 2020. So we are coming up 4 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell us about the title. How did you come up with the Ambitious Introvert? And what does that mean to you?
I had thought very much until that point about the types of clients that I'd enjoyed supporting. So although I hadn't been exclusively supporting introverts at that stage, I was trying to understand which clients do I work best with, which ones get the best results, which ones light me up, and give me energy. And the term that I came to was the action takers. I am very good at supporting people that will go out and take the action. Some people are much better suited to working with people that are very early stage and, they're not quite ready and they need clarity, they're confused. I'm not great with that. I'm much better at people that are like, okay, I'm ready to go, but I just need some accountability to get me where I want to be. And so I'd got this like action taken idea in my mind. And again, I think because I get so annoyed with this concept of, introverts are shy, introverts are underconfident, I just really wanted to make it a word that's established it as no. Introverts are doing things. Introverts are taking action. So ambitious was literally the first word that came to mind. So we just went with it.
Yeah, I love that. And that's definitely a big myth that we want to bust, is that I know some very confident, outspoken introverts. And I also look at it this way too. Sometimes I know some introverts that just have always been that way, They've always been confident. And I know some that, like myself, where that could be gained, could be learned. And for me, it was understanding my introversion, that gave me the confidence. Like, oh, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me and I have these strengths. So are there ways that you feel like if the introvert, and again, I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm not saying that all introverts lack confidence, because that is not the case. But for those that do, how can they gain confidence as an introvert if they lack it?
And look, I think that's a great point that you make, first of all, because I am a confident person. I would say I've been confident my whole life, but I'm not confident in everything. I could confidently, control airplanes, but I wasn't confident showing up on an Instagram story when I first started. So, and a lot of that was the lack of familiarity. So something I always say to clients is when we don't feel confident at something, quite often it's just because we're not used to doing it. A lot of my clients will say things like, "I'm bad at marketing." And in fact, they're just new to marketing. Marketing's something they're just learning. It's a new skill. It feels uncomfortable. They don't feel confident. And they put themselves in the "I'm bad at it." But then 6 months, a year down the line, I'll say, how do you feel about marketing? And they're like, what do you mean? It's just marketing, because it's just something that they do in their business. They don't even think about it. They've become confident through repetition, and they've become confident through familiarity. So that's the way that I would say, there is a difference between pushing yourself to do something that absolutely does not work for you and drains you, but recognizing that you will have to push yourself slightly outside of your comfort zone if you want to create something different to what you've already got.
Yeah. Yeah. So you feel like you've always been confident. That's awesome.
Yeah. I used to go up to kids in playgrounds and want to be their friend, or if we're on holiday, I always wanted to go and chat to people. I grew up as a dancer. I would, be out on stage in front of people. None of that ever bothered me. There's definitely things that I've been less confident with, but generally as a person, I would say, yeah, I'm pretty confident.
Yeah. And we can learn how to do things. And as we've been talking about, a lot of times the marketing, yeah, guess what? I'm not dancing on Instagram either. the marketing,
No,
the
I've never
market,
seen you over there
yeah,
either.
yeah. The marketing, you might take a different approach, and that's great. That's what you got to learn, is what approach is going to be most effective and not draining or even energizing.
Yeah, exactly. I find doing the podcast really energizing because I love having conversations with people. Like we've said, I love to ask questions. I like researching the guests before they come out. All of it just works really well for me. And I love sharing. I love a collaboration. So I love sharing their expertise with my audience. So for me, it's just a win-win situation.
Yeah, and I experience the same thing. It's so great to talk with people like yourself. I enjoy preparing for the show. I dive deeper into the work that you're doing, and you're doing some great work, and it's so great to have this conversation. And I'm right behind you. I started January 2021, so I'll
Oh,
be
not far behind at all.
yeah, I'll
No.
be 4 years right after you. So, and I don't have any plans to stop.
I feel like we've been connected for all of that time, one way or the other, and we've definitely
Yeah,
had a lot of similar guests. And it's funny how, Terence Lee and I said the same thing, because we have been trying to record for about 3 years for each other's podcast. And then in the space of 6 weeks, we met up in person and recorded 2 podcast interviews. It's funny how it just seems to come together at the right time.
yeah, that's great. Yeah, Terrence has been on my show. I was telling you that so far he's my only returning guest, so he's actually been on twice. So yeah, he does a lot of great work, especially around leadership and introversion.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit more about your coaching and how you help with mindset and what's self-leadership.
Oh, that's a great question. So self-leadership to me is when we know we want to do something or achieve something or make a change, but we are able to take the necessary steps ourselves without feeling pressured from other people. So we can all be quote unquote led. We can all be in a job, and a manager can say, I need you to go and do this, this, and this, and we can go and do it. But to be able to do something of our own volition that's intrinsically important to us, which probably will include pushing the boundaries of what's comfortable, taking those actions, being resilient and understanding that not everything will work first time, but that we can learn from it and continue in any way. And having that mindset that we want to achieve something, so we're going to keep taking action until we achieve it. That to me is self-leadership. And it's built up of multiple things. Our energy obviously being a huge part of it. Our mindset, because the way we think and the way we talk to ourselves is going to impact the results that we make. And so to me, if someone can lead themselves, they're in a great position, because they can go on to try and achieve anything that they want. Without those skills, without that resilience, if you get to the first hurdle and you're knocked back and you stop, that's the end of that journey. And that makes me really, really sad. So I think the more introverts that can understand how to manage their energy so that they don't burn out and they can thrive, and understand how to change their mindset, how to understand how to cultivate those beliefs that are actually going to push them forwards rather than hold themselves back. And that's not to say they don't ever waver, or, we don't ever question ourselves or doubt ourselves, but it's to say that we've got the skills that we need to recognize that that's just a belief we're having and keep taking action anyway.
Yeah. So what's your number one tip for someone changing their mindset to get what they want, to achieve that goal that they're after?
It would always be to get curious, and it would always be to ask questions. So quite often when we really pay attention to our thoughts, because a lot of people don't pay attention to their thoughts. They follow them blindly and they trust them like they're a fact, but they don't really pay attention to what they are. So if we have the same thoughts all the time, we'll keep doing the same thing. Nothing will change for us. But when we start to question it, we start to question like, that's interesting. Why do I think X isn't possible for me? It opens up a whole new avenue of ways that we can, whether it's journaling or discussing with a therapist or a coach, to start to look for different actions that we can take to get a different result. And also, I alluded to this earlier. I've always been very much like, how can I do this? So if I've decided that I want to do something, I don't think, oh, but I don't know how. I'd think, how can I find the information I need to know to do this? When we ask really empowering questions of ourselves, and when we're focused on an outcome and we look for every possible way to get to it, that expands our horizons so much. And that's the biggest way to change your mindset.
I love that. That makes so much sense. Stop thinking all the same thoughts you always think, and figure out, what do I want and how can I do this differently? And again, how can I tap into my introverted strengths
Of course.
and honor my needs and be ambitious, right?
Right. Yeah. Because you can do all of those things.
Yeah. Emma-Louise, this has been a wonderful conversation. I could talk to you all day. Is there anything else you want to add that, we haven't talked about today?
Just to remind people that don't listen to the labels. Don't listen to the kind of meme culture of introversion that has it been these personality traits. I think if we always come back to it's an energetic need and it's how we need to manage and balance our energy and forget the rest of it, you're on such a good track to start creating whatever you want in life. And also just to say thank you very much for inviting me on the show. It's lovely to see you again, and it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, where can people find out more about your great work?
So I like to keep it simple. The podcast, as you know, is the Ambitious Introvert Podcast. You can find me on the website, theambitiousintrovert.com. And I also have a monthly newsletter called Introverts Only, where I share different resources that I found that month, maybe what I've been listening to, good podcast episodes, books, all of these things. And I also round up all of the podcasts that I've released and been on in that. And you can find that at theambitiousintrovert.com/newsletter.
Sounds great. Thanks again, Emma-Louise.
Thank you. You're so welcome. See you soon.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts and links to social media channels. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code, and you can also have the option of purchasing the full report if you'd like to learn more. I'll add a link to the show notes. So many great things about being an introvert, and we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.